I parked my truck at the curb and sat behind the wheel for a minute, looking at the two-story house Great Uncle Jerry had left me. I had the keys in my pocket, for boxes in the truck bed, a bag of clothes, my tools, and less money than I wanted to admit. Still, the house belonged to me. No landlord, no roommate, no contractor telling me the job might last 3 weeks or 3 days. I carried everything inside, including an old guitar I had not played in years. The case was covered in dust before it even touched Jerry's floor, so it fit right in. The living room smelled like closed windows, old paper, and furniture polish. Books covered one wall. A piano sat near the front window with several yellow repair notes stacked on top of it. Jerry's handwriting appeared everywhere once I started looking. Fix hinge. Check pipe under sink. Call piano tuner. Replace porch lamp before winter. Apparently, winter had come and gone several times without Jerry replacing that lamp. I opened every window I could. Then I walked through the house with a notebook and made a list. The kitchen faucet leaked. 2 porch boards moved under my weight. The gutters were full. Wallpaper had started lifting in the upstairs hallway. The backyard looked like it had been negotiating with nature and had completely lost. The roof edge also needed attention, which was the one item I could not ignore for long. Write in the comments, if you inherited an old house, what would you fix first? The kitchen, the porch, the garden, or the roof? I started with the porch because it was the first thing people saw, and because one loose board nearly sent my coffee across the yard. For the next 2 days, I cleaned, carried, measured, and made several trips to a local hardware store. I had worked construction jobs since I was 19, so none of the repairs scared me. I could hang drywall, install flooring, paint a room, frame a small wall, and make a bad cabinet look acceptable from 6 feet away. What I could not do was explain what any of that added up to. I had spent years moving between short jobs in the city. Every contractor promised more work. Every apartment was temporary. Every plan depended on somebody calling me back. Now I had a house, but I still did not have a direction. On my 3rd evening in Providence, I was cutting through the tall grass near the leaning fence when I heard a woman say, "You must be Axel." I turned off the mower. She stood on the other side of the fence holding a basket with both hands. She wore a light blue summer dress and flat sandals. Her honey blonde hair rested against her shoulders, and she looked calm in a way that made me suddenly aware of the dirt on my shirt. "That obvious?" I asked. "You have Jerry's expression when something refuses to cooperate." I looked down at the mower. "This thing has refused several reasonable offers." She smiled. "I'm Daisy. I live next door." Her house was white with green shutters. Flowers lined a stone path, and rows of tomatoes and herbs stood neatly behind her. Compared with my yard, hers looked professionally managed. She lifted the basket over the lowest part of the fence. "I figured you probably haven't had time to cook." Inside was a loaf of warm bread wrapped in a clean towel, a small jar of dark honey, herb butter, and a folded welcome note. "That's accurate," I said. "I've been living on poor coffee and food that comes in plastic." I could tell. "From what?" "You bought 3 frozen dinners at the corner market yesterday." I stared at her. "You saw that? I was behind you." That explains why the cashier looked disappointed in me. She looks disappointed in everyone. Daisy did not offer her hand right away. She looked at me with open, amused curiosity, as though she was trying to decide whether I belonged beside the old house. Then she said, "It's nice to have a reason to stop by." There was just enough in the way she said it to make me forget about the mower. "Thanks for the basket," I said. "Really? You're welcome, Axel." I watched her walk back along the garden path. She stopped once to straighten a flower stem, then disappeared through her kitchen door. That evening, I ate half the bread on the porch. It was the first thing in the house that felt made for the present instead of left behind by Jerry. Through the fence, I could see Daisy sitting near her garden with a book open in her lap. Over the next week, we kept finding reasons to talk. She told me which lumberyard had the best prices and which hardware store employee would try to sell me things I did not need. I tightened the loose fence boards between our yards. She gave me the name of a reliable plumber, though I insisted I could handle the kitchen pipe myself. Jerry had apparently been known for refusing help too. He once used a stack of books to support a broken table leg for almost a year, Daisy told me. "That sounds efficient." "It was a first edition under there." "That sounds less efficient." She laughed, and I started noticing how easily she did it around me. Some evenings, she sat on the porch while I sorted Jerry's books. Daisy had worked in publishing before moving to Providence. Now she edited manuscripts from the office in her house. So people send you unfinished books? I asked. Mostly unfinished. Sometimes they believe they're finished. And you tell them they aren't? Politely. I held up one of Jerry's records. Can you politely tell this piano it needs help? She looked through the open window at the old instrument. Jerry loved music, she said. He was not especially talented, but that never slowed him down. I used to play guitar. Used to. I got busy. Daisy glanced at the guitar case leaning near the stairs, but did not push the subject. The next afternoon, the kitchen pipe proved I had been too confident. By the time I finally replaced the worn fitting, my shirt was damp, my knuckles were sore, and every towel in the house was on the floor. I went outside and sat on the porch step. A few minutes later, Daisy came through the gate carrying 2 glasses of mint lemonade. You look successful, she said. The water is staying inside the pipe. That is generally the goal. She sat beside me. Our shoulders touched lightly, and neither of us moved away. For a while, we talked about the city, short-term jobs, and the strange feeling of waking up without traffic outside the window. You seem content just being here, she said. I'm trying to be. Trying. I looked back at the house. I can't tell whether this place is my future or just a pause while I figure out what comes next. Daisy turned the glass slowly between her hands. Most people your age seem like they're always running after something. Maybe I got tired of chasing things that never felt real. She looked at me for a second longer than usual. Then she nodded, almost to herself. That night, after she returned home, I walked through the rooms checking the faucet, the windows, and the porch boards. Old houses always made sounds. Pipes clicked. Floors shifted. Wood settled after the heat of the day. But somewhere along the way, I had started listening for something else too. The soft sound of Daisy's gate opening. Her steps crossing the path. Her voice saying my name from the other side of the leaning fence. A few days later, Daisy found me trying to move Jerry's largest bookshelf by myself. It was Saturday morning, clear and already warm. I had removed every book, pulled the shelf away from the wall, and convinced myself I could turn it through the living room doorway without taking it apart. I was wrong. The bottom corner caught against the frame, the top pressed into the ceiling, and I ended up standing behind it with both arms wrapped around the side like I was holding up a wall. Daisy appeared at the open front door. Is this a private argument? I'm winning. The bookshelf seems confident. I almost have it. You've been in the same position since I walked out to water the tomatoes. I looked past the shelf at her. She wore dark jeans, a soft green top, and her hair was tied back loosely. Are you offering help or commentary? Both. She stepped inside and studied the doorway. Then she pointed at the middle of the shelf. Take those adjustable boards out. I was going to. Of course. We removed the shelves, turned the frame onto its side, and tried again. Daisy took the front while I guided the heavier end from behind. Left, she said. I am going left. Your other left. That is not helpful. It would be helpful if you listened. We made it halfway through the doorway before one corner caught again. Daisy shifted her grip, I stepped backward, and both of us nearly lost balance. She laughed so hard she had to lean against the wall. I'm glad this is entertaining. It is now. We finally carried the frame into the living room and placed it against the far wall. When I stood it upright, it fit perfectly between the window and the old piano. Daisy stepped back and nodded. There. Now Jerry can stop judging us. You think he was judging? He judged everyone who moved his furniture. You knew him pretty well. Better than most people did. I went into the kitchen and made coffee. Jerry had left behind an entire cabinet of mismatched mugs, and Daisy chose one with a faded picture of a lighthouse. I handed it to her. That was his favorite, she said. How do you know? He always gave guests the plain cups and kept this one for himself. So I should take it back? No. I think you're allowed. We sat on the floor near the stacks of books and began returning them to the shelf. Daisy organized them faster than I did. I mostly looked at the covers and tried to remember where they had been. She pulled out a hardback novel with a blue cover and stopped. I worked on this. You edited it? One of my first projects after I moved into fiction. I took the book from her. Her name appeared in the acknowledgments near the back. You're in here. Editors are usually hidden near the end. That doesn't seem fair. It's part of the job. Jerry had written notes in the margins. Some were about the story. Others were complaints about the characters making poor decisions. Daisy smiled as she read them. He sent me a letter about this book, she said. 3 pages, mostly about why the ending should have been different. Did you answer? I did. What did you say? That I agreed with him. She turned another page, and I reached toward the same line she was pointing at. Our hands touched. Neither of us moved. Her fingers were warm against mine. She looked down at them first, then up at me. The room went quiet, but not in an awkward way. It felt like both of us had finally stopped pretending we had not noticed what had been happening between us. Daisy slowly pulled her hand back. You're looking at me, she said. I know. Are you looking at me because I'm the only woman next door? No. Her expression changed slightly, though I could not tell whether she was relieved or more nervous. I set the book down. I'm looking at you because every time you leave, the room feels different. She studied my face long enough that I started wondering whether I had said too much. Then she moved closer and kissed me. It was gentle at first, careful, like she was giving both of us time to change our minds. I did not. I lifted one hand to the side of her face, and she leaned into it. The second kiss lasted longer. When we pulled apart, she stayed close enough that her forehead nearly touched mine. Well, she said quietly. That sounded serious. It might be. We sat there for another moment, both smiling slightly, both unsure what came next. Nothing dramatic happened. Daisy did not suddenly become a different person, and neither did I. We made more coffee. We finished loading the shelf. She found several records Jerry had kept in paper sleeves, and I tried to get the old player working. The belt had slipped and the needle needed replacing, but I managed to get one side of a jazz record playing at the wrong speed. Daisy sat on the arm of the couch while I adjusted it. You repair everything you see? She asked. Most things. People too. I looked at her. No, that seems dangerous. Good answer. Later, I took out my guitar. I had not planned to play it, but Daisy asked whether it still worked, and I did not have a reason to say no. The strings were old. My fingers felt stiff. I played part of a song I had written years earlier and stopped after the first verse. That's all I remember. I don't believe you. I remember the chords. The words were bad. How bad? City traffic, cheap rent, feeling lost. Very original. I edit unfinished work for a living. That doesn't make mine worth hearing. It means I know unfinished is not the same as worthless. The way she said it made me look at her. I wondered whether she was still talking about the song. By late afternoon, the books were back on the shelf, the coffee pot was empty, and Daisy's hand had found mine twice without either of us commenting on it. At the door, she turned toward me. I don't know what this is, she said. Neither do I. She watched me carefully. But I don't want to pretend it didn't happen, I added. Daisy's shoulders relaxed. I like that answer. She kissed me once more, quickly this time, and walked home through the gate. For the next 2 weeks, we kept things simple. Daisy came over for coffee. I helped tie her tomato plants to taller stakes. She lent me books and complained when I folded the corners instead of using a bookmark. I replaced the needle on her record player, and we spent an entire evening listening to albums she had collected during her years in publishing. Sometimes she sat beside me while I played guitar. Sometimes I worked in her garden while she read editorial notes aloud and asked whether a character's decision made sense to someone who did not work with books. The kissing became easier. A hand at her waist while she stood beside me in the kitchen, her head against my shoulder on the porch. A long pause at her front gate that ended with both of us forgetting what we had been discussing. But after the closest moments, Daisy sometimes became distant. Not cold, just careful. She would return to her house earlier than expected or become quiet in the middle of a conversation. I noticed, but I did not ask right away. I thought she might need time. Then one evening, while we were sitting on my porch with the lights off, she said, "You're not seeing anyone else, are you?" "No. Neither am I." I turned toward her. "Are we making a rule? We're being clear." "Okay. Then I'm not seeing anyone else, and I'm not planning to sell the house." "I didn't ask about the house." "You were going to." She gave me a small smile. "Probably." I took her hand. "I won't make promises just because you're worried. But I won't hide behind being unsure either." Daisy looked at our hands for a long moment. That's more honest than most promises. From inside the house, the old piano gave a small wooden click as it settled. Daisy looked through the open door. "You should repair that next." I was thinking about the porch rail. The piano has waited longer. So have the gutters. The gutters are not interesting. I laughed. She leaned against me, and for the first time since the kiss, she did not pull away when the moment became quiet. I sat there with her beside me, looking at the dark shape of Jerry's house and the warm light coming from her kitchen next door. For once, I was not thinking about where I might go after Providence. I was thinking about what I could build if I stayed. By early September, the house no longer looked abandoned. The porch rail was steady. The kitchen faucet behaved. I had stripped most of the wallpaper from the upstairs hall and found decent plaster underneath. Jerry's books filled the living room shelf again, and the old piano had been moved away from the dampest wall. Daisy had also started leaving things behind. First it was a paperback on the coffee table, then a blue mug in the kitchen, then a cardigan over the back of one of Jerry's chairs. She never announced any of it. Her things simply began appearing among mine, as if the house had decided before we did that she belonged there. One cool evening, we sat on the porch while I worked on an estimate for a neighbor who wanted her porch steps rebuilt. Daisy read over my shoulder. "You should charge more. I've done the math. You've charged for materials and labor. You forgot the part where you actually know what you're doing. That part is included." "No, that part is why people hire you." I leaned back in the chair. "You sound like an editor." "I am an editor." "Then edit this." She took the notebook and rewrote my short description in the margin. Careful repair and restoration of older homes. Porches, trim, built-in shelves, small garden structures, and practical maintenance. I read it twice. That sounds like a real business. It could be one. The idea had been sitting in my mind for weeks. I liked repairing Jerry's house more than I had liked most city jobs. The work felt different when I could see the full result instead of finishing one small task and leaving before the next crew arrived. The older houses around Providence needed exactly the kind of work I knew how to do. "I don't have a business name," I said. "You have a last name." "That seems unimaginative. It also seems easy to remember." A week later, I registered the business. It was small enough that nothing about the process felt impressive. I filled out forms, opened a separate account, printed simple cards, and posted the description Daisy had written on a local page. Still, when the first call came from someone I had never met, I stared at my phone before answering. The job was a porch repair 3 streets away. Then came a set of built-in shelves. Then an old fence that needed straightening instead of replacing. I cleared a room at the back of Jerry's house and turned it into a workspace for plans, tools, receipts, and samples. Daisy helped me organize everything, though she complained that I kept pencils in 4 different places. "You need a system," she said. "I have a system." "What is it?" "I look until I find one." "That is not a system." While I was building something of my own, Daisy started opening a file on her laptop that she had avoided for years. I first noticed because she shut the screen when I walked into her kitchen. That looked suspicious. "It's only writing." "You're writing?" She hesitated. Then she turned the laptop around. The document had a title at the top and more than 80 pages beneath it. "I thought you only edited other people's books." "I do. You also write one." I started one. 80 pages is more than a start. Not when you have 5 different openings and no ending. She let me read the first 2 chapters that evening. I did not tell her they were perfect. They were not, and she would have known I was being polite. Instead, I asked why one character had hidden a letter and whether another character understood more than Daisy was showing. She looked at me differently after that. "You actually read it. You gave it to me." My former husband used to say he would read my work when he had time. "And did he?" "No." I closed the laptop. "You don't have to tell me about him." "I know." She looked through the kitchen window toward my house. "But I think I should." The conversation happened in October beside the small fire pit behind her garden. It was a clear evening, cold enough for jackets but not cold enough to send us inside. Daisy told me she had married a man older than she was because his confidence had felt like safety. "At first, it was comforting," she said. "He always knew where we should live, what we should buy, what I should do next." That sounds exhausting. It became exhausting. He made every decision, then acted like he was helping me by making it. She kept her eyes on the fire. When I disagreed, he treated it like I was confused. After a while, I started wondering whether he was right. I did not interrupt. "I stayed longer because I thought being mature meant enduring things," she continued. "Leaving felt like admitting I had been wrong from the beginning. You were allowed to change your mind." "I know that now." The fire cracked between us. Then she said, "That's why this scares me." "Us?" She nodded. "You're still becoming whoever you're going to be. You could finish the house, make the business work, start playing music again, and realize this was only where you stopped for a while." I looked at her, but she did not look back. I don't want to become someone you outgrow, she said. I don't want to be the older woman you remember because she helped you figure yourself out. I wanted to tell her she was wrong. I wanted to promise that nothing would ever change. But she had already lived with someone who spoke with certainty and expected her to trust it. So I told her the truth. I can't prove the next 20 years tonight. I can only show you what I choose tomorrow. Daisy finally looked at me. And what are you choosing tomorrow? I have a porch estimate at 9. Then I'm buying lumber for your greenhouse. My greenhouse. The one we're building in spring. You never said we were building a greenhouse. I'm saying it now. Her expression softened, but she still looked afraid. I'm scared of how much I've started needing this, she said. I'm scared too. That doesn't make me feel better. It's not supposed to. I'd rather be honest inside it than safe outside it. She watched me for a long time. Then she reached for my hand. Later, when the fire had gone low, Daisy asked me to stay. There was no dramatic speech. No sudden decision made because the evening felt romantic. We went inside, locked the back door, and stood quietly in her kitchen with our hands still joined. She kissed me first. I followed her upstairs. The next morning, sunlight came through the curtains, and I woke to the smell of coffee. Daisy was in the kitchen wearing my work shirt over her clothes from the night before. You left this here, she said. I was wearing it. You have others. I poured coffee into the mug she had started keeping at my house. So this is theft. Temporary borrowing. We ate toast at the counter and discussed greenhouse sizes as though the night before had not changed anything. But it had. A week later, the first frost damaged the last of Daisy's tomatoes and most of her basil. We stood in the garden in bright, cold morning light while she examined the leaves. End of a season, she said. Next year, we'll build you a greenhouse. She turned toward me. I knew she had noticed the word. We, she asked. We. She smiled, but before she could answer, my phone rang. It was another local job. Then another came that afternoon. Within 2 weeks, I had accepted too much work. I told myself it was temporary and that I needed to take every opportunity while people were calling. One Thursday, Daisy and I planned dinner at her house. I promised I would be there by 7. At 8:15, I was still repairing a damaged stair rail across town, and my phone was in the truck. When I finally reached her house, the kitchen was clean, the food had been put away, and Daisy was sitting at her desk with a manuscript open. I'm sorry, I said. The job ran late. You could have called. I know. She kept looking at the screen. This is how it starts for me, she said. What does? Someone decides his time matters more, and I'm expected to understand. That's not what happened. It felt like it. My first instinct was to explain the client, the loose rail, and why leaving would have been difficult. Instead, I sat across from her. You're right. I should have called. Daisy looked up. I'm not asking you to stop working. I know. I'm going to stop scheduling jobs so close together. And I'm keeping Sunday free. You don't have to do that for me. I'm doing it for us. She studied me carefully, almost waiting for me to become defensive. I did not. Finally, she closed the manuscript. The dinner can be reheated. I probably deserve cold food. You do. She stood and walked toward the kitchen. Then she looked back at me. But I'll heat it anyway. I followed her, relieved not because the argument had disappeared, but because neither of us had. And while she set 2 plates on the counter, I understood that staying was not one large promise. It was answering the phone. It was changing the schedule. It was showing up the next day and making a different choice. Winter changed the way Daisy and I spent time together. In summer, we had crossed paths in gardens and on porches. Now she usually came through my back door carrying her laptop, a stack of pages, or something she claimed was necessary for dinner. Her blue mug stayed beside mine in the cabinet. A pair of slippers appeared under the couch. Her cardigan remained on Jerry's chair for so long that I stopped thinking of it as something she had forgotten. She still lived next door. Some nights, she worked in her own office and slept in her own bed. We did not discuss selling houses, combining money, or making some large announcement about our future. We simply became part of each other's routines. She edited manuscripts at the dining table while I prepared estimates in the back room. We cooked breakfast late on Sundays. She read new pages of her novel to me, and I played guitar while she marked changes in the margins. When the weather was clear, we walked around the neighborhood in coats and talked about the greenhouse. The first sketch had been too large. The second blocked the best afternoon light. By the fourth version, Daisy accused me of designing a small train station. You said you wanted room for tomatoes, I told her. I want tomatoes. I don't need a ticket counter. We settled on a practical size and made a list of materials for spring. The house changed during those months too. I repaired loose trim, replaced 2 cracked floorboards, and built a simple desk beneath the upstairs window. Daisy started using it when she needed a break from her office next door. One evening, she placed several printed chapters on the new desk. That's the middle of the book, she said. You wrote a middle? I did. Is there an ending? Don't become demanding. I picked up the pages. Months earlier, she had hidden the manuscript when I entered a room. Now she left it where I could see it. That felt important. The conversation about our age happened in January while we were washing dishes after dinner. Daisy handed me a plate, then kept hold of it when I tried to take it. Have you thought about what you might want later? She asked. I think about later all the time. I mean things I may not want, or may not be able to give you. I turned off the water. She mentioned children, returning to city life, building a larger career, and eventually wanting someone closer to my age. I did not laugh or tell her none of it mattered. It matters, I said, but pretending I know every answer tonight wouldn't help us. What do you know? I know I don't miss the city. I know this business is becoming real. I know I want you in the plans I'm making now. And the things you don't know? We keep talking about them. Daisy looked down at the plate between us. What if one of us changes? Then we talk again. We don't leave early just because change is possible. She finally handed me the plate. That sounds reasonable. You say that like you're disappointed. I was hoping for something unreasonable but convincing. I can write it down and add dramatic music. She smiled and bumped her shoulder against mine. By February, my work schedule was steady without being out of control. I had learned to leave space between jobs, answer messages, and protect the evenings I had promised to Daisy. I also accepted that Jerry's piano was beyond my ability. I repaired the loose bench, cleaned the case, and replaced one damaged felt strip. Then I called a local tuner named Glenn, who spent an hour explaining everything I had misunderstood. When he finished, the piano was not perfect. Several keys still felt heavier than the others, and its tone had the worn quality of an instrument that had spent years near a drafty window. But it played. That evening, Daisy sat beside me on the bench while I worked through the chords of the song I had stopped writing years earlier. I had rewritten the first verse and added a second. My hands were less certain on the keys than on the guitar, but the melody came through. When I stopped, Daisy remained still. Well, I asked. You finished more than you said. It needs work. Most worthwhile things do. That sounds like something an editor would say. It's something a woman with 5 old openings and 1 new middle would say. I played the last section again. This time, she rested her head against my shoulder. By the end of March, the greenhouse panels and framing materials had been ordered. Daisy had completed 3 more chapters. My business account finally contained enough money that one slow week would not cause a problem. The house felt lived in. Jerry's books shared the shelf with Daisy's. My guitar stood beside the chair instead of inside its case. Her garden plans covered one corner of the table. Only the front door still looked exactly as it had when I arrived. I planned to replace it. Daisy objected before I finished the sentence. That door belongs on this house. It's chipped, faded, and slightly warped. So repair it. You usually support new materials. I support good decisions. The next morning, she arrived carrying a can of warmer deep red paint. She set it on the porch. Some things have to be let go, she said. Some things just need to be made new. Restoring the door took most of the weekend. We removed the hardware and scraped away every loose section of paint. I repaired the damaged lower edge with a fitted piece of wood. Daisy sanded the panels while wearing old jeans, a cream sweater, and a look of complete concentration. She also got red paint on her cheek before we had even opened the can. How did you do that? I asked. I'm preparing. For what? To blame you later. After sanding, we cleaned the surface and applied primer. We had to wait before adding the first coat, then wait again before the second. The process was slow, but when we rehung the door, the color looked deeper and softer than the old harsh red. Daisy stood on the walkway with her hands on her hips. It looks good on the house, she said. I looked at the red mark still near her cheek. Looks good on you. She came closer and took my hand. I think it looks good on us. That evening, we sat beneath a blanket on the porch with the renewed door behind us. Fresh bread cooled in the kitchen. I had learned to make it from Daisy's instructions, though mine came out slightly uneven. The greenhouse plans waited on the table beside her manuscript. The piano inside was imperfect but useful, which seemed right for Jerry's house. Daisy rested her head on my shoulder and squeezed my hand. I had arrived in Providence believing the property might be a pause between one temporary life and another. The house had not solved everything. My work still required effort. Daisy still had fears, and so did I. We still had separate homes and questions we would need to answer when the time came. But we were no longer using uncertainty as an excuse to stand outside the life we wanted. I looked back at the deep red door. I thought Jerry left me a house, I said. Turns out he left me somewhere worth staying.